that was a really important conversation. And one of the things that Tywana mentioned is just the range of treatment options. And you're right, there are a range of treatment options out there, and it's easy to get overwhelmed. In a nutshell, our friends at compareuf.org note that treatment options basically fall into 3 categories. So there's treating the symptoms, which a few of us talked about being put on birth control. There's treating the size or the growth of the fibroids, or there's removing or destroying the fibroids altogether. That's a range from, like I said, birth control and ibuprofen to a major surgery that takes you out the game for up to 6 weeks. Then there's the not treatment. Watchful waiting. Some of you out there who are watching might have heard this from your doctors. I know I certainly heard it a lot on my journey. So with the limited options out there and the limited information out there, and again, kind of like we talked about earlier, this overall just culture of silence around uterine fibroids, I want to throw the question out to the group. How did you decide which treatment option was right for you?
My doctor presented me with the option of doing 3 to 4 months of Lupron shots. And then because my uterus was so enlarged, she wanted, rather than to do my surgery, to do it via laser, she wanted to cut me. And I had already been cut when I was 19. And I, being a reader, knew enough to know that, all this new technology was out and that there had to be some other options. And so after reading more about Lupron, which I'd heard of before, thank goodness, and I was not comfortable with such options, I began to do some research, something that we, the White Dress Project, talk to women about all the time, about being better advocates for ourselves. What she shared with me was so uncomfortable to me at this phase in life that I started to do some research first to see what other options were out there for me. And in doing so, I decided to get a second opinion to talk about my second options. And that's what assisted me in the process, because I just did not want to go back under the knife again, knowing that there was so much technology out here now that maybe, just maybe, there were other options.
Mm-hmm. For me, in the whole treatment options, look, I was diagnosed first at the age of 22. I didn't have my first surgery until 10 years later, the age of 32. Yeah. Obviously, that's a very, very long time. And for me, the watching and waiting and being told that by physicians really influenced my decision making. I brought everything with me. I brought the journals about what's happening to me. Yeah. And everything they say do, right? So that you can be your own best advocate. But being told time and time again by the medical professionals that the symptoms that you're experiencing, is it really that bad? Led me to really delay, I think, the treatment options or seeking treatment. But again, I didn't think of it as a delay, because this is what all the doctors were telling me was the safest course. Even as my uterus continued to grow and I went from being described as having a few fibroids to the size of my fibroids being described in terms of a pregnancy. But you start to trust medical professionals, and you think they're the people who know best, right?
Yeah.
So surely if they're telling me to watch and wait, then I need to sit up here on this birth control and just keep on waiting.
When I first got diagnosed, I was told to watch and wait too. And I remember thinking to myself, like, watch and wait for what? Like, right. What are we waiting for? Because eventually they're going to cause a problem. And sure enough, like all of us in the test, they do. So sometimes I really don't understand the ideology behind watching and waiting. Mm-hmm. But anyway, when I finally decided to do something was when I got married. And I remember going to a white male doctor and telling that my husband and I needed to save our money to get a surrogate, because it wasn't, going to be possible for me. And to be a mother, it wasn't going to be possible for me. And that devastated me. And it was literally about 4 months after I had gotten married. So that was very hard for me. But I ultimately came to a treatment option because I was thinking about what I wanted my end goal to be. And my end goal has always wanted to be a mother, I want to be a mother. I am a mother. I want to be a mother. And that's my mantra I'm saying to myself. I am a mother. I want to be a mother. So for me, ultimately, treatment options needed to align with how do I get to motherhood? So for me, maintaining and maintaining my uterus was most important. Now, after I've gone through 2 myomectomies, now I'm like, was that my best option? Because now all of the scarring and all of the, going in a second time and messing with your uterus, like that does have an impact on fertility. So you kind of feel like you're in a catch-22 position.
Watching and waiting is expensive.
Yeah.
Because it can cost one. And I just want, and this is why advocacy is so important. It can cost you your entire reproductive system watching and waiting. 11 years of my fibroid journey. And all I think about, all I thought about at one point in time is, what if? So even if my decision had still been to get a hysterectomy, I felt like I was robbed of the opportunity and the time to consider other things.
Yeah.
All these ultrasounds when I probably should have had an MRI years before I ever had one. I would put money on it today that I probably had endometriosis and adenomyosis, and I had those 10 fibroids way longer than I ever knew about it. So watching and waiting is expensive because of what it can cost us emotionally and in our health. And one of the reasons why I stand on board even still is because I don't want my niece or your baby sister or your daughter or the next person's daughter to sit around with any watch and wait. That needs to be over. It's dead because it just costs too much. And just to even talk about it again today even angers me. And I just want every medical professional to even know about it, how much it angers me, because it just costs us as women, as young girls, as grown women, as women who want to start families, it costs us too much. Watching and waiting is robbery to our reproductive system.
Like I said earlier, the reason I did have surgery so quickly was because I was desperate to relieve the pain, but I could never understand. And I'm glad my doctor never brought that to me as an option. And I don't know if it's because the relationship I had with my doctor from having PCOS, going to her for so long, but that she knew that I wanted to be a mother. So the watch and wait was never an option for me. So I am so grateful that even though I did, had to have a myomectomy first and later ended up having the Acessa procedure, I'm very grateful that my doctor took the time to listen to me, to hear like what my end goal was, and then move at my pace. Like she knew I wanted to have the surgery as soon as possible. She knew the second time around I didn't really want to have a surgery. So I had learned about the Acessa procedure through White Dress Project. And I asked my doctor, I said, hey, is this an option for me? Would you be willing to go to training to learn how to perform this? She hadn't heard about it until I brought it to her. And she ended up going to training, and she did the procedure on me because it is less invasive, less scar tissue. So I really think in the treatment options, I do think it's very important that you advocate for yourself. I do think it's important to even talk to other women and be like, what was your journey like? And although, you can only take people's advice for so much, you have to decide for yourself. But I do think having that, those discussions do help you come to a better decision than watching and waiting, for sure.
I didn't really have anyone tell me to watch and wait. And then at the same time, I kept pushing for relief, I guess, so to speak, because I got tired of being cold because I was anemic. for that year. I got tired of changing pads. I got tired of messing up my clothes. To the final straw, I was in a wedding, and I was glad the wedding colors were red, and my dress was red. So to the point that I did have a small little accident, but nobody could see the stain in my dress because it was red. But back to the point, I did have a myomectomy. And at first I was asking, could I have the UFE, since it was laser, but my doctor said since I hadn't had children and she wanted to leave the option open for me just in case. She didn't really know too much about UFE, so her recommendation at this time for me was the myomectomy, and the incision is so small you can't even see it. So for me, that's what worked. And I think a lot of it has to do with cultural biases also. So even though I know we're talking about the treatment options, but at the same time, you talk about culture, you talk about race and relations. Sometimes people think that people can take pain just based on race. They can wait. Maybe they think that you can't afford it. Maybe it's just various topics that kind of trickle upon each other, and they all kind of have an effect. They think, well, just based on bias, she's Black, she doesn't have insurance, she might not be able to afford it, so let's just make her wait. But I couldn't wait. I was too tired of feeling tired, so I just kept pushing. So that's my story.
Well, I don't know if the doctors see your insurance or not, but insurance the whole time and experience the same thing. I just want to go back to Tywana. You talk about being angry about watching and waiting.
Yeah.
I'm just as angry with you. Like, the campaign. I've heard that there is someone out there doing research about whether or not watching and waiting should even be a standard of care anymore. I talk to them. So if you're watching this, please call me.
Yeah.
But I want to say that part of why that's so dangerous, I think back to my own journey. Again, 10 years before my first surgery, another before my second surgery. The watching and waiting literally made my options limited. So forward from 22 to 32, by the time I'm 32 and I'm ready for my first surgery, I'm so anemic that they can only go in and take out a few fibroids because any other surgery would have been too dangerous for me.
Wow.
Fast forward 2 years later, 34, I have an open myomectomy. I actually had it about a month ago now. They ended up taking out 24 fibroids. I had a very, very large uterus. And I think if we hadn't waited so long, would I've had the large cut? I've got a large incision down from my belly button down to my bikini line. I've got the classic cut, they say. I don't know why they call it that. That's not cute. But I wonder if we hadn't watched and waited for all those years, would my story had to have ended with such a major and dramatic surgery?
I feel like I had to make the decisions that I made backed up against the wall. And no woman should have to make such a life-changing decision backed up in a corner.
Yeah.
And, as I said, my day-to-day had completely changed. It wasn't once a week or once a month. My day-to-day had changed, and I was definitely suffering in silence because this was not an everyday conversation for me. But, some of the things that angered me, in addition to the whole watching and waiting, was every year or every single appointment, my GYN talked to me thoroughly, but yet we weren't taking the steps that would have avoided me being in the position I was in 2016. To maybe had we addressed these issues earlier. And so I, like I said, I put money on it. Those 2 fibroids were 10 plus, because there were more, but those were the 10 major ones, that we talked about at the time of mine. But there's so many things that could have changed that we can't go back and change now. And so here we are as the White Dress Project, in hopes that, other women will hear our stories and it won't be the same for them.
times. You know, there's a lot of conversation around diet and fibroids, and I personally believe that there has to be a balance between what doctors are saying, the scientific aspect, and also what's happening within our bodies and what we're putting in our bodies, including the chemicals and the makeup and all of that. I feel like all of it has a balance. So I do think it's important, going back to the point of having this conversation so that we can share some of these things that other women potentially, you know, have more information to make better decisions about what their health outcomes should be.